In the shadowy recesses of history lie tales too dark for classrooms, stories of betrayal, tragedy, and the unimaginable. Join us as we uncover the top 20 terrifying historical facts that challenge our understanding of humanity. From hidden massacres to government conspiracies, these chilling events have been shrouded in silence. Dare to delve into the forgotten corners of our past and discover the secrets that have shaped our world. The omission of terrible historical facts in school curricula significantly impacts our understanding of the world, often painting an incomplete picture of history and human nature. Let's delve deeper into a few more horrifying historical facts that are often shrouded in shadows. Number 20. The Holodomor, 1932-1933. The Holodomor, meaning death by hunger in Ukrainian, was a devastating man-made famine that struck Soviet Ukraine between 1932 and 1933. This catastrophic event resulted in the deaths of millions of Ukrainians, with estimates ranging from 3.5 to 7 million people. The famine was largely a consequence of Soviet policies under Joseph Stalin, particularly forced collectivization, which aimed to consolidate individual landholdings and labor into collective farms. Collectivization led to widespread disruption of agricultural productivity, confiscation of grain and other foodstuffs, and severe restrictions on the movement of people. These measures were enforced ruthlessly, with the Soviet government requisitioning crops and livestock to meet state quotas, leaving the rural population with nothing to eat. The borders of Ukraine were sealed to prevent the starving population from seeking food elsewhere. Many historians and the Ukrainian government regard the Holodomor as a deliberate act of genocide, orchestrated by Stalin's regime to crush Ukrainian nationalism and resistance to Soviet policies. The famine was accompanied by mass repression, deportations, and arrests of those who were seen as enemies of the state. Despite the scale of the tragedy, the Soviet Union denied the famine for decades, and only in recent years has it received widespread recognition as a deliberate act of mass murder. The Holodomor remains a deeply traumatic event in Ukrainian history, symbolizing the brutal repression and suffering experienced under Soviet rule. It serves as a poignant reminder of the devastating impact of totalitarian regimes on human life and the importance of historical memory in acknowledging and preventing such atrocities. Number 19. The Belgian Congo, 1885-1908. King Leopold II of Belgium ruled the Congo Free State as his personal property from 1885 to 1908, transforming the region into a site of extreme exploitation and brutality. Under the guise of philanthropic and civilizing missions, Leopold's administration sought to extract maximum economic value from the Congo's vast natural resources, particularly rubber and ivory. To achieve this, the colonial administration imposed a system of forced labor on the Congolese people. Villages were required to meet impossible quotas of rubber collection, and those who failed to comply faced horrific punishments. These included beatings, mutilations, and executions. The infamous practice of cutting off the hands of workers to demonstrate that bullets had not been wasted was particularly brutal and became a symbol of the regime's cruelty. The human cost of Leopold's exploitation was staggering. Conservative estimates suggest that the population of the Congo was reduced by 10 million people due to murder, starvation, disease, and the harsh conditions of forced labor. The exact number of deaths remains a topic of scholarly debate, but the impact was undoubtedly catastrophic, resulting in one of the most egregious humanitarian disasters in colonial history. The atrocities committed in the Congo Free State eventually drew international condemnation. Reports by missionaries, journalists, and human rights activists exposed the horrific conditions and abuses, leading to a global outcry. Among the most influential was the British consul Roger Casement's report, which documented the widespread abuses and helped galvanize public opinion against Leopold's regime. In 1908, under mounting pressure, the Belgian government annexed the Congo Free State, taking control away from Leopold and transforming it into the Belgian Congo. While this change brought some administrative reforms, it did not fully alleviate the suffering of the Congolese people, as colonial exploitation and racial discrimination continued under Belgian rule. The legacy of the Belgian Congo under Leopold II is one of profound exploitation, violence, and enduring trauma. The events of this period have had a lasting impact on the Congo, contributing to ongoing struggles with political instability, economic challenges, and social unrest. The history of the Belgian Congo serves as a stark reminder of the destructive potential of unchecked colonial ambition and the importance of accountability in the stewardship of human rights. Number 18. The Rwandan Genocide, 1994. The Rwandan Genocide, which took place over a brutal 100-day period from April to July 1994, is one of the most harrowing and tragic events of the 20th century. During this time, an estimated 800,000 people, primarily Tutsis and moderate Hutus, were systematically slaughtered by extremist Hutu militias, known as the Interahamwe, and the Hutu-dominated government forces. The roots of the genocide can be traced back to long-standing ethnic tensions between the Hutu and Tutsi populations, exacerbated by colonial rule and post-independence political dynamics. These tensions reached a boiling point on April 6, 1994, when a plane carrying Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana, a Hutu, was shot down, killing everyone on board. While the perpetrators of the attack remain disputed, Hutu extremists quickly seized the opportunity to launch a premeditated campaign of extermination against the Tutsi minority and moderate Hutus who opposed their extremist agenda. The genocide was characterized by its extreme brutality and the use of rudimentary weapons such as machetes, clubs, and firearms. Entire communities were annihilated, women were subjected to horrific sexual violence, and children were not spared from the slaughter. The violence was often perpetrated by neighbors, colleagues, and even friends, driven by propaganda that dehumanized the Tutsis and incited hatred. The international community's response to the genocide was shockingly inadequate. Despite clear warnings and evidence of escalating violence, the United Nations and key world powers failed to take decisive action. The UN peacekeeping mission in Rwanda, UNAMIR, was critically under-resourced and lacked the mandate to stop the killing. Requests for reinforcements and broader intervention were largely ignored or met with bureaucratic delays. In the aftermath of the genocide, the global community faced widespread condemnation for its inaction. Reports and investigations, such as the 1999 report of the Independent Inquiry into the actions of the United Nations during the 1994 genocide in Rwanda, highlighted the failures and missed opportunities to prevent the mass atrocities. The genocide stands as a stark reminder of the catastrophic consequences of international inaction and the need for timely and effective intervention in the face of mass violence. The impact of the Rwandan genocide continues to reverberate through the region and the world. Rwanda itself has undergone significant transformation, with efforts to rebuild, achieve justice, and promote reconciliation under the leadership of President Paul Kagame. The country has established the Gacaca courts to deal with the vast number of genocide-related crimes and has worked towards creating a unified national identity. Number 17. The Dancing Plague. The outbreak started in July 1518 when a woman known as Frau Trophea started dancing wildly and passionately in a Strasbourg street. Trophea continued the non-stop dance for a week. 3 dozen more soon followed. The dancing plague had 400 casualties by August. Dancers were starting to falter. Some are even believed to have passed away from heart attacks or strokes. Since nobody knew what triggered this reaction, nobody knew how to stop it. The outbreak started to fade in early September, at which point the dancers were sent to a temple in the mountains to offer prayers for forgiveness. Similar incidents are reported to have happened throughout the Middle Ages, notably in Kölbig, Saxony, in the 11th century, when people thought they were the outcome of divine judgment. A tarantula bite caused a woman in 15th century Apulia, Italy, to dance convulsively due to the poison. According to experts like Athanasius Kircher, the only method to treat the bite was to shimmy and have the appropriate music on hand. Number 16. Unit 731, 1937-1945. Unit 731, a clandestine Japanese military unit during World War II, conducted grotesque medical experiments on prisoners of war in occupied Manchuria from 1937 to 1945. Led by microbiologist Shiro Ishii, Unit 731 subjected thousands of victims, mostly Chinese civilians and captured soldiers, to unimaginable horrors in the name of research and biological warfare development. The unit engaged in a wide range of sadistic experiments, including vivisection, live dissection, frostbite testing, forced pregnancies, and exposure to deadly pathogens like anthrax and bubonic plague. Victims endured excruciating pain and suffering, often without anesthesia, and many died as a result. Others were executed to maintain secrecy. Unit 731 also sought to develop biological weapons, testing pathogens on animals and releasing infected insects to spread disease. Despite attempts by the Japanese government to conceal these crimes and grant immunity to its members in exchange for their research data, the truth about Unit 731 has gradually emerged through survivor testimonies, declassified documents, and historical investigations. Number 15. The Great Leap Forward, 1958-1962. Mao Zedong's campaign to rapidly transform China's economy, known as the Great Leap Forward, stands as one of the deadliest episodes in modern history. Launched in 1958 to surpass Western industrial achievements and create a socialist utopia, it instead resulted in a devastating famine. Central to the Great Leap Forward was the forced collectivization of agriculture, merging small farms into large people's communes, unrealistic production targets, inflated grain output figures, and the abolition of private farming practices led to widespread inefficiencies, crop failures, and food shortages. Natural disasters like droughts and floods further exacerbated the crisis, plunging millions into starvation. Conservative estimates suggest at least 15 million people died from the famine, while some placed the number as high as 45 million. The human suffering was immense, with reports of widespread starvation and social upheaval. The Great Leap Forward shattered the myth of Communist Party infallibility and exposed the harsh realities of Maoist rule. The famine undermined support for the regime, eroded trust in government institutions, and led to significant agricultural policy restructuring under Deng Xiaoping. Number 14. The Noble Experiment. In 1926, the United States government took a questionable approach to the growing problem of alcohol consumption during Prohibition. They proceeded on what they called a noble experiment, which effectively involved contaminating alcohol with dangerous chemicals. Imagine this. They not only boosted the concentration of methanol in alcohol, but also added benzene and mercury for good measure. The goal was to scare people away from drinking. Doesn't that seem extreme? In hindsight, that was not the wisest option. Surprisingly, the plan backfired. Instead of reducing alcohol consumption, people became more determined to obtain any booze available, even if it meant drinking dangerously poisoned combinations. It's almost like advising someone not to push the huge red button. They are bound to do it. The effects were terrible. By 1927, 41 people had died in New York's Bellevue Hospital as a result of alcohol poisoning, and the trend continued. When Prohibition was ultimately repealed in 1933, the harm was clear. The federal poisoning program had unintentionally taken the lives of around 10,000 additional people. It's an intriguing reminder of how good intentions may lead to disastrous events, prompting us to consider the unforeseen repercussions of the so-called Noble Experiment. Number 13. The Trail of Tears. The Trail of Tears. In the early 1800s, when Andrew Jackson was President of the United States, a tragic occurrence occurred. The forced relocation of Native American tribes from their homes in the southeast to lands west of the Mississippi River. This terrible tragedy, known as the Trail of Tears, represents a dark period in American history. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 authorized the government to take Native Americans' properties in the eastern cotton-growing regions and exchange them for territories in the west, known as the Indian Colonization Zone. However, this was not a straightforward swap. It was a cruel and unjust act committed by the U.S. military. Members of the Cherokee, Muscogee Creek, Seminole, Chickasaw, and Choctaw nations were forcibly removed from their territories. More than 60,000 Native Americans marched thousands of miles under terrible conditions and with little supplies. This trek resulted in widespread sickness, famine, and death, with an estimated 4,000 displaced Cherokees dying. The impact of these forced relocations extended beyond the loss of life. Native American countries not only experienced the terrible losses of their people, but they also lost their traditional territory and lifestyle. Number 12. Library Alexandria. A unique location was established in Alexandria, Egypt. He, eager to attract the best minds of the day, sought counsel from his advisor, Demetrius of Ferrum, when faced with the task of bringing in renowned philosophers. Demetrius had a fantastic idea: the hidden heritage of Mount Rushmore. The story of Mount Rushmore's distinctive exterior predates its development into a symbol of American presidential history. Before the huge carvings of U.S. presidents, the location was sacred to the Lakota Sioux Native American tribe, known as the Six Grandfathers. The Treaty of Fort Laramie, signed in 1868, recognized the Black Hills, which include Mount Rushmore, as part of the Great Sioux Reservation. However, the desire for gold prompted an influx of immigrants, and the United States government failed to uphold the treaty's stipulations, resulting in a problematic chapter in history. This narrative revealed a multifaceted story about indigenous heritage, territorial rights, and the complex history of national monuments. Mount Rushmore, now an image of American pride, echoed the unresolved echoes of unfulfilled pledges and dispossessed communities, overshadowing the grand visages of presidents. Number 10. The Atlantic Slave Trade. 16th-19th century. The Atlantic slave trade, which lasted from the 16th to the 19th century, forcefully transported nearly 12 million Africans to the Americas under harsh conditions. Millions died during the Middle Passage, a perilous journey defined by overcrowding, sickness, and cruel treatment. Those who survived endured arduous labor, institutional oppression, and dehumanization on plantations and in other forced labor environments. The slave trade had a terrible impact on African society, including community upheaval, depopulation in specific regions, and the fostering of internal wars as rival groups competed to capture slaves. The economic and social fabric of African countries was irreversibly changed. The transatlantic slave trade helped to deepen racial inequality and injustice in the Americas, leaving consequences that still exist today. The exploitation and misery faced by enslaved Africans left an indelible impression on the New World's social and economic institutions, influencing history and the civil rights movement. Number 9. The bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 1945. In August 1945, the United States unleashed atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killing roughly 200,000 people, the majority of whom were civilians. The bombs caused enormous human misery, with survivors enduring long-term consequences from radiation exposure, such as cancer and chronic disease. These strikes are particularly contentious due to the astounding number of casualties and ethical issues about attacking civilian populations. The bombs had a crucial impact on Japan's decision to surrender, thereby ending World War II. They did, however, usher in the nuclear age, introducing the world to the destructive power of nuclear weapons, while also raising profound ethical and existential problems. The events sparked global debates over the morality of nuclear warfare and the need for such measures to achieve peace, impacting international politics and arms control efforts for decades to come. Number 8. The Armenian Genocide, 1915-1923. The Ottoman Empire staged the Armenian Genocide from 1915 to 1923, which resulted in the methodical slaughter of an estimated 1.5 million Armenians. The Muslim-majority Ottoman administration targeted primarily Christian Armenians in response to a combination of political, theological, and ethnic issues. The genocide began on April 24, 1915, when hundreds of Armenian intellectuals were arrested and executed in Constantinople. Armenian men were separated and executed, while women, children, and the elderly were forced to march to the Syrian desert, where they died of malnutrition, dehydration, and violence. The Committee of Union and Progress, KIAP, commanded by Talat Pasha, Enver Pasha, and Jamal Pasha, methodically planned these crimes. Despite substantial evidence and eyewitness reports, the Turkish government has long denied the genocide. This denial has raised substantial diplomatic tensions, recognizing the genocide is critical for ensuring justice, historical accuracy, and preventing future crimes. Number 7. The Partition of India, 1947. The Partition of India in 1947 resulted in the formation of two sovereign nations, India and Pakistan, as well as one of history's greatest and most violent mass migrations. Religious divides drove the partition, which resulted in widespread panic and horrific communal violence. Around 14 million people were displaced as Hindus and Sikhs relocated to India and Muslims to Pakistan. The shift was characterized by chaotic and frequently violent migrations, with death tolls ranging from 200,000 to 2 million. Families were shattered, communities were destroyed, and many people were subjected to heinous crimes. The hastily executed and poorly planned partition sparked profound animosities and laid the groundwork for long-standing hostilities between India and Pakistan. This division had profound and lasting impacts on the socio-political landscape of the subcontinent, influencing Indo-Pakistani relations and shaping the national identities and political climates of both countries. Number 6. The Great Emu War of Australia. In the 1930s, Australia faced an unusual conflict known as the Great Emu War. After World War I, the country experienced an agricultural crisis worsened by an unexpected adversary, emus. These large, flightless birds migrated inland during breeding season, wreaking havoc on the newly cultivated lands of Western Australian farmers. Frustrated, many of these farmers, who were ex-soldiers, sought help from the government. In response, the government dispatched a small military force armed with machine guns to cull the emu population. However, these resilient and swift birds proved challenging adversaries. The public, upset by the treatment of the emus and the military's lack of success, voiced their discontent, leading to the withdrawal of the operation. Eventually, the government adopted a more effective bounty system to manage the emu population. This peculiar episode in Australian history highlights the unexpected challenges in agricultural management and the complexities of human-animal conflicts. Number 5. History of the English language. Tracing the footprints of the Angles, Saxons and Jutes in the historic geography of the British Isles during the 450s AD revealed the English, the linguistic forebear. The linguistic footprint unfolded across the decades, displaying a compelling alteration of the English language that occurred in 3 different acts: Old English, Middle English, and Modern English. The collision of Normandy and England in the crucible of shared governance was a watershed point in the 10th century. The following chapter, Middle English, demonstrated the indelible effect of Norman ideas, a dance with Old French that left an imprint on the language's fundamental character. Fast forward to the era of Shakespeare, a transformative point in which the linguistic landscape throbbed with newfound vitality. Shakespeare, the genuine master of the English language, sculpted its form by introducing over 200 new words, creating a linguistic harmony that has echoed throughout history. His linguistic painting strokes shaped the fabric of modern English, a language spoken by over 2 billion people worldwide that transcends borders and cultures. In this linguistic adventure, time and language are intertwined, dancing together through a proof of the ever-changing mosaic that defines the English language. The echoes of the past resound in the words we use today, serving as a painful reminder that language, like history, is a living organism that is always growing and eternally enchanting. Number 4. Bengal famine of 1943. The Bengal famine of 1943 served as compelling proof of the devastation caused by man-made disasters. This catastrophe occurred in the heart of Imperial India, taking the lives of an inconceivable 2 to 3 million people over the 20th century. It wasn't just a product of nature's brutality or crop failure. Rather, it was the terrible result of the British administration's wartime policy decisions during rice grains thrived in Bengali fields, offering food for the locals. However, the British Empire's scorched earth policy, implemented in fear of a Japanese invasion, transformed wealth into risk. Boats and bullocks, which were essential for food distribution, were brutally taken and destroyed. Simultaneously, the urgency of military requirements took precedence over the critical local food supply, resulting in a sharp increase in rice prices and significant food shortages. As tales of mass famine grew, relief attempts stalled due to wartime strategic priorities and British officials' carelessness. It wasn't until late 1943 that the devastating scope of the famine became obvious, spurring the introduction of considerable relief measures. The Bengal famine, which is carved in history, was a dramatic demonstration of the dire effects of colonial rule, as well as a harsh reminder of the profound human cost of political decisions. Number 3. The Great Emu War of Australia. During the 1930s, Australia had an odd conflict known as the Great Emu War. Following World War I, the country faced an agricultural crisis exacerbated by an unexpected adversary: emus. These enormous, flightless birds came inland during the breeding season, wreaking havoc on Western Australian farmers' newly cultivated lands. Frustrated, many of these farmers, who were ex-soldiers, sought government assistance. In response, the government dispatched a small military force equipped with machine guns to exterminate the emu population. However, these hardy and quick birds were formidable opponents. The public were dissatisfied with the treatment of the emus and the military's lack of success, prompting the operation's departure. To further regulate the emu population, they implemented a more effective bounty system. This unusual incident in Australian history emphasizes the unanticipated difficulties in agricultural management and the complexities of human-animal conflicts. Number 2. The not-so-glorious life of pirates. Pirates are frequently represented in myths and folklore as courageous explorers who travel wide oceans in search of hidden treasures. However, the reality of piracy is far from glamorous. Life on a pirate ship was difficult and dangerous. Pirates had limited access to fresh food and clean water, which contributed to the spread of diseases such as scurvy. Storms, conflicts, and shipwrecks offered constant threats, making life dangerous and unpredictable. Despite these limitations, pirate ships practiced democracy, electing captains and quartermasters through crew votes. This was a significant shift from the strict hierarchies observed aboard navy and mercantile boats. However, most pirates faced a difficult existence at sea, which frequently resulted in brutal deaths or imprisonment. This brutal reality exposes that life as a pirate was not the exciting adventure many people assume, but rather a journey defined by survival and the unforgiving sea. Number 1. The Little Ice Age. The Little Ice Age, which lasted from 133 to 1850, was more than just a historical event. It was a frozen reality, imprinted on the lives of people who lived through it. The longing warmth of summer turned frigid, spreading a constant chill across European landscapes. Harsh winters became the norm, and even summers defied predictions, with uncommon frosts in July and August. In the 17th century, abnormally cold weather lasted for years, decimating agricultural harvests and ushering in famine. Nature, once bountiful, became unfriendly as animals succumbed to the severe cold. Birds froze in mid-flight in the winter skies. As Europe struggled for survival, painters depicted the terrible scenario on canvases, such as George Morland's Breaking the Ice, which vividly depicts a family facing strong winds to retrieve water from a frozen reservoir. The human toll remained unknown, with some dying from starvation, some from diseases, and many succumbing to hypothermia. Scientists attributed the Little Ice Age to a slowing of the Gulf Stream and increased volcanic activity and solar output. Thanks for tuning in to our exploration of history's intriguing and often surprising tales. We've delved into events that shaped our world in unexpected ways. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating historical insights. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you next time.